providing practical, cutting-edge wisdom, embracing all parts of the human experience into a map of transformation, accelerating soul alignment for individual and collective ascension. We are your hosts, Jonathan Mozenter
and Rachel
on
the Relationship Alchemists. Welcome to today's episode, The Path of Purification.
In today's episode, we're really just introducing to you what this path is about. Now, just to refresher, this is still in the first person. This is an individual path. And within this path, we have 4 areas we're going to be talking about: self-awareness, subtle energy healing, limiting beliefs and stories and how to let go of them, and feeling suppressed feelings. All of these will help you increase your coherent energy and help you live your highest truth. With that, Soraya, let's get into self-awareness.
So there are so many archetypal paradigms that help with aligning with your purpose, which is this first category we want to talk about when it comes to self-awareness. It can really be the grounded heart of the way that you show up in the world. And there are things we've talked about in previous episodes like gene keys and human design, astrology, Myers-Briggs, Enneagram, all of which are profiling tools to support this mission. But a lot of times aligning with our purpose also looks like being in some sort of solitude hermitage and really being alone with ourselves or with nature to really get to the core of how we want to express when no one's there to bounce our energy off of.
Aligning with your purpose is an unfoldment. It's a process. As Soraya just mentioned, it has meditations and contemplations and self-awarenesses. And all the other kinds of self-awarenesses in here play a role in that. I'd like to just talk a little bit about my own process of coming to my purpose. And I'm here to help people fall in love with life and make their dreams come true. And it took me a long time to get to the root of that. I'd say my whole life I was on purpose, even though I didn't totally know exactly what I was doing. It kind of was an unfoldment. I just followed my heart in each and every moment. There was a period of my life where I knew I wanted to get into psychology because I knew something growing up in a family with social workers. I understood that mastering your mind was a key aspect to living your highest dreams. And another point in my life, I was into organizational psychology because I realized if we're going to live society as a collective, not just an individual dream, but like the collective dream of everybody being able to live in peace and harmony, and each individual has an opportunity to live their higher self, I would need to know codes around group psychology and organizational psychology. As I got into it and I got stuck in my own life and making that dream come true and bringing those skills together, I learned more about other things like meditation and energy, and all that kind of came as a composite. And even we're going to talk a little bit more about past lives, but understanding how my past life wounds affected me today. For example, I have a past life wound that ended in a very terrible way, and I came into this life very motivated to make sure that didn't happen, that not only was my life going to be meaningful to myself and make myself happy, but that was also going to make everyone else happy. And so I'm here to be of service. I'm already living my dream life of helping people live their dreams.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Jonathan. It's nice to make some of these personal.
Yeah.
So as we go into the next section, parts work, I can maybe talk a little bit about my history too. Growing up, first off, let me just explain a little bit about what parts work is. Parts work is a practice whereby we dialogue with aspects of ourself, and where we get really familiar with, for example, the inner child or one of our protector personalities. And by meeting them with tender love and compassion, and also some reparenting, we have an opportunity to create a new inner relationship which integrates our parts into a more coherent or singular expression. And when we do that, that's when our momentum can really take off. Because, for example, when I was in my early 20s out of college, I had 4 or 5 different plot lines that were all developing really slowly, and 3 or 4 different friend circles to experience them through. My sense of self had all these little subcompartments and wanted to express individually. Like, I'm going to go do flow arts with my circus friends, or I'm going to go read at the library. And so, as I began doing parts work, I actually mapped that there were, I think, 8 or 9 personality masks that I had tried on in my early 20s, fitting in different places as I made new friends. And that each of them had a core wound, a reason they were created, and a series of gifts that came along with living life as them. And ultimately, I did a lot of integration work with these parts and revealed the core personality behind the parts, which is what I'm showing up as today, which is this priestess, spiritual mentor, like guide of others. And that the reason I had tried on so many masks and actually lived life as them was to explore the potentiality of the human experience and really create firsthand compassion for all of those other ways of being and living, and to really root myself in my humanity as I blossomed into the butterfly that offers divinity. And so that's one example of what parts work can look like.
I mentioned there are a lot of different schools of parts work. For example, I'll just mention two that come off of mind. There's something called like Big Mind, which is a really cool practice where people talk about like, what's it like to, what does your controller sound like? And what does your big heart sound like? And what is your part of you that's scared? And you start to just feel into what that part's trying to tell you and have different parts converse. It can really help you resolve inner conflict, for example. There's another really popular system called internal family systems, which has broken things out. I've been exposed to that one probably more deeply than some of the other ones. I think Soraya mentioned manager protector parts, really interesting parts. Just to give an example, I discovered that I had at certain points in my life, childhood specifically, been teased in a certain way, and I had developed up a protector part to kind of protect me from having that wound over and over again. And I actually would be dialogue with those parts, and those parts they created, they still remember when they were created and the age that you are then, and they don't actually see you kind of evolve. It's kind of like the mind gets into these states where you can't handle something as it is, and it creates a part to deal with it, to manage with it, and it keeps active even. Usually these protector parts get suppressed and they're just kind of operating in the background until you do this kind of deep purification work where you can surface them. And then there are ways to change your relationship to the parts and reorganize your parts. But first you have to be aware that these parts are even there. And one of the key ways of getting in touch with these kind of parts is through meditations and getting in touch with subtle thoughts. To be honest with you, I did not start meditating until I was 40, and that was about a decade ago. And before that, I started meditating. Even in the beginning of stage meditating, I didn't really know what was going on in my own mind at a deep level. I was operating at more of a surface level, and I was running patterns. And eventually, I got so sick of running these patterns, I decided to get into meditation because I know my mind was going really fast and I was stuck in patterns that I couldn't get out of. But when I focused on meditating, and the reason why the meditation, it depends on what kind of meditation you're doing, of course, but there's like a concentration meditation, and one aspect of that is to disidentify between the observer, which is a deeper part of yourself, and the information that it's observing. And just moving when in some schools, like in the integral school, they call that the gross level, when you start to see all of it as one thing. But when you start to break it into parts, like we were just talking about, and you start to first differentiate, there's a part of me that observers, and then there's all these different parts that it's observing. That's like a game changer. And then you realize that you are not the parts, but you are the observer. Now you're empowered to have different relationships with these parts. And so the more you're able to see the distance between these different parts and not react to them, like be able to just take them in as they are, as an energy in your being, and feel them fully without trying to push them away or make more of them, allows you to get this kind of intimacy where you can get to a place where you can actually almost reprogram your mind by changing your relationship to the parts.
Yeah, and this, what you're talking to, Jonathan, about the importance of meditation is so key because I remember I used to have a somewhat quiet mind, so I thought I didn't have any repressed content. And it was as I began meditating more that I had enough spaciousness from my thoughts that those subtler thoughts started even emerging. Like I remember I thought I had a great relationship with like my body. And it wasn't until I was deep into meditation that I would hear my body kind of like grumping about things. Like, oh, we haven't eaten yet. Like think ways of hearing our own thoughts that aren't really surfacing until we create enough spaciousness to witness them. Because something in the psyche knows that it isn't ready to be processed yet.
Yeah.
And going into parts work a little bit, since I mentioned the body, International School of the Temple Arts has a system where you relate to your body, your gut, your heart, and your mind,
That's something, yeah.
all as entities that relate to each other. And then when you find the agreeance point of all of them is when you really have a sweet spot. And for me, that was big because I don't think I'd ever really fully delineated between the gut and the body before, but they had the gut as more of the survival instinct, and that left the body open to interpretation as more of like a sensory, like pleasure instinct. And so for me, kind of sparsing those apart, like we all have mind, heart, mind, body kind of paradigms, but the four pillars really created a lot of balance.
Yeah, the ISTA program, the International School of Temple Arts, did a really good job. I think they called their parts work aspecting. Well, they have multiple parts works within their program that was really well done. And I think another area that the ISTA program helps get at is about actually getting into these deeper wounds that we may have forgotten. There's a lot of suppressed stuff. I know as I did this work, I just remembered all kinds of things that I'd put out, like bullying kind of things that happened, or I remember getting like a colonoscopy when I was 3 years old, and how traumatic that was. Or I remember the first time I felt like really wronged by the world and how that affected me. And the ISTA program has a really unique ability to get into like sexual wounds and to help remember that. They have some really magical techniques. A lot of people, a lot of people think sexual wounds has to be like a rape or something like that, and that's obviously a major sexual wound. But there, you could have all kinds of things growing up, or parts where sexuality is an unknown, and someone puts you in an uncomfortable place, and that counts as well.
Coercion,
yeah, coercion,
grooming.
grooming, and so it's a part of the purification process, just surfacing all these different deep things that our mind may have pushed away.
Yeah. And another important thing with the sexual wounds is it really influences our relational field. And so to come with self-awareness around how you're meeting that is so foundational. It's a healthy relationship. Yeah. And then, yeah, all of these are core wounds, like things that, are rooted in some sort of I can't or not enoughness. There's something about us that's wrong or condemnable.
Absolutely.
And these are the parts of us that most want to express that have been hiding the longest. And
Yeah.
it creates this really sweet, almost like softening of the soul when you can hold these parts of you dearly and offer them the reverence or respect or even just acknowledgement or attention that they needed at the time but weren't receiving.
Core wound is something that is not well understood or well discussed this area. I first discovered it in the landmark course in their advanced program. Now I agree with Soraya, there are lots of core wounds could be plural. I think that's absolutely true. We have a set of wounds that are very powerful, but there's always going to be one wound that's going to be deeper than all of them, which is the deepest of the core wounds. And that pattern I found in my own life first started in actually started in a past life, and I didn't purify it in a past life, so I brought it in to this life. And I discovered in this class that this wound, for example, in my life, it was about you. You talked about shame or humiliation. I was teased a lot for being an emotional person, for crying, and called a crybaby. And eventually, it was a serial wound, and there was a point where it got too much for me, and another part of me took over, and I was like, there was so much self-loathing around this aspect of myself. I literally changed my entire being in a moment. I remember it very clearly in the fifth grade, where I chose to not. I was just like, enough of this, and I'm not having the shame anymore. And I retreated deeper into the mind, and pushed away feelings, and that had a whole bunch of ramifications on how the rest of my life unfolded. And it brought me some of my greatest superpowers, like detachment, and also some of my weaknesses, like being very ADD or being not as embodied. And part of my journey has been to get to the root of why I was like that and how to keep the superpowers I had, if not actually heighten them, but also reclaim some of the things that I had lost. And over the period of time, I've become much more comfortable with my emotions and feelings. And I think that identification is a key. It really helps people to really know what that is and then see how that pattern plays out in your life. And then learning to, once you identify what that pattern is, you can make different choices about it.
Another thing about past lives is a lot of times they are expressions of what is repressed in our genetics and in our biological inheritance. And so it's also sometimes known as like ancestral healing or generational trauma. When we heal our past lives, it has major beneficial effects, not only for us, but for our family members, for humanity. Like, it's very deep work. And the people that I know that have dealt with past lives, often it's because there is something in their body that doesn't quite make sense in the modern culture we live in as far as a survivalism thread or instinct, which was very common in hundreds of thousands of years of society before the last 100. And so it's those deeper survival wounds that often come up and have those narratives evolve around them to be resolved.
Absolutely. The fast live things was fascinating. I was skeptical of it. I kind of never heard of it. But then as I got determined to become my higher self, and I was open to trying different healings, and we're going to talk about some of those other methods to getting at past lives, I was unbelievable to find out all those to see the patterns. Really, what was cool about the past lives wasn't just to know what I did in a past life. It was actually all my past life work was about actually the traumas that I had in the past lives, re-remembering them and actually connecting the dots. I was like, oh, I never resolved that trauma, and then I was re-wounded, not in the exact same way, but so I have the exact same kind of cluster of traumas in this life to resolve it. It's like part of the evolution process. So why don't we get into the second category here, the subtle energy healing. This is a broad topic, and there's a lot of different subtle healings. We're just going to introduce some things.
This is also a field that's considered to be impacting the quote unquote etheric body. So just like a parallel or twin of the physical body. And so there are lots of interpretations of what subtle energy is or what it's impacting, but all of these tools are giving us a kind of deep health that is beyond what we average day think of supporting ourselves with in a self-care way. But when we go to these practitioners, we feel such a well of vitality emerge from that we honor the fact that it is powerful to nurture this part of ourselves that we haven't tracked in common history before. But subtle energy healing is what we're calling it.
Yeah, it's not super well documented, but there are people who have tried to track different. I know in the integral theory model that they have some certain maps, but there's a lot of different subtle bodies. I mean, like a chakra system is a typical one, like a meridian system. Tibetans talk about the nadis. There's a lot of different kinds of, there's quantum healing. So I think we're just going to go through some techniques that we've used, and just to give a little examples. I think everything on the list here I've had a direct experience of and could talk about at least. And this is a very much an emerging field.
Yeah, for sure. I'd like to start us off with sound healing
let's
because
do
this
it.
is one of the ones that has been the most impactful for me.
Nice.
I got a bunch of early sound healing experiences that, because it's literally vibrating into the core of your being, I had this sensation of hidden tension in my body just gently being shaken loose.
Wow.
And I had the first sound healing I ever did, I was actually kind of like shaky afterwards because so much had like sifted in my internal presence from all the vibrations from things like singing bowls and gongs and chimes that have the most obscure Tibetan names. It's like this object you've never seen in your life, and they make the sound, and something in your soul is just like, wow, I've heard that before, and I'm so glad I heard it again. Just like sense of something ancient coming back to common reality.
If there's a lot of kinds of sound healings, and in my experience, there's two directs. I mean, there's like gong healing. There's like tuning forks for another reason. I've seen people do stuff with bells and synthesizers. I've experienced numerous kinds of, but one effect could be like, I remember one person did like a tuning fork and it was showing like, hey, you've got really strong energy, the person said, but it's like, there's like overly focused around the chakras, and not as much rooted in the bottom. I was like, well, that makes sense given my traumas and histories. And she helps, like, as you were saying, is like when you're doing those kinds of healings, it can have some subtle shifts and start to reorganize their things in a healthier way. Another thing that I've noticed in my own personal experience with a lot of sound healings is I tend to be very visual, and they can take me on journeys. Different kinds of sound healings can send me almost like in an altered state, in a visionary state, shamanic state, and that can give me visions or experiences that allow for deeper self-awareness or deeper healings.
So for people that haven't had a sound healing experience in person yet, commonly there are a bunch of yoga mats laid out facing the stage, and you put your head near the stage so you can receive the transmission directly into your being. And there's often pillows, or people will bring their own blankets. It's a very like cushy, loungy kind of thing to receive. And I think that's also why it's soul nourishing to me. There's kind of this nestiness in it.
Yeah. Yeah, I love sound healing. I wanted to talk a little bit about something that's very new. So, Shai and Rachel love to try all the new cool stuff. So, this is something that somebody I'm studying with right now, we've mentioned in previous shows. His name is Donnie Epstein, and he's invented an alchemy thing where he's invented this thing called an epigrid. And an epigrid is kind of it's a really cool way of people quickly being able to identify what's in their subconscious and reorganize it. And he's is a real genius, and I really feel like his techniques are really gonna push humanity forward in transformation in a fast way. He's like noted that sometimes our traumas are often are associated with roles that we've been in, and when you figure out what roles those are, and you start seeing, learning to see, using his technique to see the world through different roles, you can totally change your energy and outlook on life. And this is something I'm helping people with.
It also can have a lot to do with the direction of energy, too.
Absolutely, yeah.
So there's a lot of power in that system for sure.
Yeah, Donnie helps people identify whether they have a preference for seeing information way out in the future or being more grounded on what's just going to happen next. And once you understand what your preference is, you can align your being to that and live a much more energy rich life. I wanted to talk a little bit about how wounds are held in the body. Or some people believe that. There's a whole book about the body knows the score, about how wounds are held in the body, or one of the places they're held in. My direct experience is that they can be held in all different places and they can be cured in different ways. But I've had numerous long massages combined with other kinds of techniques, like craniosacral or shamanic journeying, or using altered states while getting a massage. And it's allowed me to almost like as the massager is working on a certain part, that'll like elicit a certain kind of memories or feelings that are aligned with that place in the body. I've walked out of those massages feeling like a totally different person, like something, like some aspects of my consciousness, this subtle energy is like actually left my body, and I just like feel a higher version of myself, a lighter, more positive. Certain negative patterns will get less or sometimes go away through that technique. I know some other odd techniques like Reiki I've experienced. I haven't done it a lot, but when I've done it, it's been powerful. The practitioners use their palms and they go to different energy spots, and stuff happens. Sometimes when you're doing subtle energy stuff, you can't always explain it, but you like feel this like crazy shift, and just afterwards, so some of the patterns shift. The times I've used Reiki where it's been most effective was where they actually combined it with some other things. There was this woman, Linda Nat Mullen in New York, and she has these amazing, she's a stacker like Sarai and I, and she first did parts work with me, and there was a bunch of other stuff she did, and eventually she closed with the Reiki, and it just left a powerful imprint, and I definitely felt shifted after that. Soul retrieval is another kind of healing I've done several times, where the healer will actually go into another dimension where you've been split and like with a wound, and will actually bring that shard of life back into you. And it's another powerful modality. It's the same kind of thing. You walk out of the experience a different person. I will say, well, I want to caveat, I've done a lot of stuff, and what I discovered was that as you kind of go down the path of purification and do these kind of healing things, you're kind of guided to the technique that you're exactly needed.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I was hearing you talk about soul retrieval,
Hmm.
and I was observing that it sounds a lot like parts work, but just them doing it on an energetic level.
Yes.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah. I did it with a lady in here in Denver, and she put a bunch of crystals, and there was a ritual, and she called in a lot of guides, and she was really plugged into the field, and it was a huge shift afterwards.
Nice. So
I would
then,
definitely consider crystals subtle energy healing too. There's
For
those
sure.
crystals each like have a unique purpose and an energy, and if they're used in the proper context, they can really help give you experiences that need to help you foster your growth.
Yeah, and they're also used for clearing chakras too, which is our next thing that we
Yeah.
wanted to talk about. Like, I've really been dialing in how to assess the energy field of chakras with pendulums. Some people do it with their palms, but there's so many ways of cleaning the chakras.
Mm,
What comes to me is a lot of stuff we've already mentioned,
mm.
like the stones, sound healing. What other ways of clearing chakras are standing out to you, B?
Oh, you can do different kinds of like meditations. Like you could like imagine your chakras are dirty and then imagine them cleaned. You can do something that's really powerful. Is a Tibetan technique called inner fire, where you actually create a fire in your belly and you watch it burn off the parts of your chakras that are ready to kind of be removed. That's a very esoteric but super powerful technique. I think like another thing that elicits subtle energy healing that I think you have a lot of wisdom on is the essential oils really do elicit different states that allow you to do different kinds of subtle energy healings.
Yeah. It's almost like emotional healing too. It's like the oils, when they hit the bloodstream, are actually activating certain kinds of releases. It's really powerful work.
And the last one I wanted to talk about in this category is something called Healy, which is we're getting into like very esoteric, very modern technological tool. It's like a little device that like shoots out quantum healing, and there's like several hundred kinds of programs. You can even get custom programs, and it's really fascinating. It will change frequencies in your field. It'll like set up your. I noticed afterwards different kind of shifts and thought patterns, or when I've combined it with other kinds of altered state stuff, it helps. It's just like a like almost like a crystal has an energy. Well, this quantum kind of field will also send out an energy that will allow you to have different state experiences that will enhance your healing and different insights, increase your self awareness. And there's a lot to be said about that device, but something to keep on your radar. It's not a inexpensive device, but something I think that's we're starting to. It's made by the hardware is made by a German company, and the first software company is somebody in Portugal. But it's a new powerful subtle energy technique. So let's get into letting go of limiting beliefs and stories. Maybe that's something
Category
that's,
3.
yeah. We should talk about what we mean by limiting beliefs and stories. So, what I've discovered through all the work I've done is that when we're growing up or even when we're older, things happen in our life and we make up stories about life. And could be because of the culture or your context or something about your context could be about your family or the school you were in or what was going on in the world at that time, or if it have to do with certain traumas. And frequently in traumas, we make up certain declarations or decrees about life that we then go deep into our unconscious and we live our life through them until we surface them and reprogram our mind. So a decree is just like a short declaration, and they're very powerful. And I study with this guy Mark Schur and Compass Life, and he has a whole protocol that he learned from someone else and also enhanced with his own experience in it. He's been in it for over 10 years that helps people surface decrees and change decrees. And it's really powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. Decrees are fundamental. It's kind of like we don't even realize how much of reality we aren't experiencing
Hmm.
because the subconscious decrees are just knocking entire chunks out of our possibility field.
Yeah.
Like when you really clear out and create stronger decrees for yourself, you feel your potentiality increasing again.
So maybe we should give some examples. It's like some people have a decree that I'm a victim of life. And then they're because they've made that decree deep in their subconscious, they're filtering their whole reality. So when something happens, they just assume that they're a victim, and it's actually a good thing in a way because it's getting them to recognize the pattern. That's the upside of having a negative decree, is it helps you with the self awareness. What if you had of worldview, a decree of like everything in this life serves me, and you filter everything through your experience through that lens rather than being a victim? It changes your whole experience of reality. And there's lots of little decrees that you can learn. And I'd be happy to, if anyone's interested in experiencing that thing, that's a coaching mentoring service that I offer. And another technique that really works with it is another thing I offer is something called bars, or access consciousness. And this is a really interesting technique. It involves some subtle energy healing too. You put your hands in certain positions on the back of someone. Usually, most of it's on the back of somebody's head or different parts of their head. There are a couple of positions that use like hands and feet, but it's mostly with the head. And somebody discovered that each of those positions, when you hold them in a certain way, it's almost like it's clearing your RAM, if you're like a computer, certain memories. And what you can do is you can work with the person to surface in those different spots, might be holding certain limiting beliefs about life, and there are some clearing statements, and you can get really precise with the person about the exact stories that they are limiting their life, and you can work with them to clear them. And it's really powerful to both have the hand position, which kind of takes that information temporarily out of the memory, and then if you get the clearing statement, then you can get at the root cause. So there's a difference between somebody just doing the hand positions, which will clear stuff off, but then if you haven't gotten to the reasons why, when you get out in the world, you'll recreate those negative karmic things again until you get to the place where you're able to clear them.
Yeah, I think my favorite moment with bars to date was when we were working with a client that didn't feel like he could handle feeling his
Yeah.
anger or had permission to be angry.
Yeah.
And when we cleared that from the RAM, his forehead just immediately smoothed out of all wrinkles.
Yep.
And he looked kind of distressed, and he was looking around like, I don't know what we just did. I don't know. We should have done that.
Yeah.
Just like an immediate shift
Yeah.
in
so
the field. Yeah. And
he gave himself permission, or he let go of the story that he couldn't handle feeling anger. And in that moment, his whole life changed.
yeah, he had an immediacy to his presence where previously it was like he was filtering everything through how he thought it would be perceived. And after that, he had a little more intensity to his energy,
Absolutely.
but it was direct and authentic and
Clear.
present and clear, honestly clear. Yeah, it was beautiful. There are other aspects of what we can let go of with the limiting beliefs, like liberating parental wounds. There are so many ways in which our parents, especially if you're an oldest child, just accidentally,
I think this applies to everybody.
yeah,
Nobody escapes parental wounds. Unless your parent, or whoever your parents were, if it was the grandparents or friends, but whoever your immediate caretakers were, and how they were shaping your reality and helping you understand how to live in this reality.
expectations are handed down.
Expectation, worldviews are handed down. There's wounds in just being like, hey, don't cross the street. You're gonna get killed, because then like you feel like you're wrong. There's like, we don't
Or you're
realize
gonna die.
Yeah, you're a little die. And we don't realize that because we don't have the capacity to have multiple perspectives, where some of us just internalize those as being wrong. And we've learned a lot about limiting beliefs. There's a lot of people believe that there's the victim model, the hero,
Hero, victim, villain.
yeah,
Villain.
yeah, and a lot of people get trapped in wanting to, and one of those three buckets as a predominant one, until you kind of like see how they're all enabling each other.
Yeah, the victim transmuted becomes the conscious creator, and the hero becomes like such a nurturer. There's so many ways in which society kind of through its disposition towards trauma bonding kind of pulls people back into the dramatic triangle and plays off of each other and passes roles around. There's often not even like a clear persecutor and a clear victim in situations. It's like, I'm tossing it your way, you're tossing it my way. And it takes someone stepping out of the triangle and being willing to just feel the emotional tension and not act on it to really like break into the next level of what's actually available without all the scripts. It's kind of sad how much it's proliferated in media. Like every video has to have a hero and a villain.
Yeah.
That's like the most archetypal trope of television.
Yeah, it's deeply ingrained in our subconscious. I want to talk about some perspectives that we've talked a lot about negative beliefs, but I want to get into a new way of looking at things. That there are new stories of that serve us. Like I've learned this perspective about what if you took authority for your entire life and you say, I am the God. I believe everybody is God, actually. And I actually designed my entire life to be exactly it is. And I wounded myself in a certain ways. So I was motivated to get the superpowers that come from that and also motivated to heal that and teach other people to heal that and get other superpowers from in that healing process. And there's a lot more power in that perspective of like being the authority of your own life and that everything serves. And
Was that what you would call the retrocausal timeline?
that could be part of the retrocausal timeline. The retrocausal timeline is that you,
Outside of time invented your ending last and then the rest backfilled?
yeah, I actually got that from a conscious language thing, the author of your own life, and retrocausal timeline is something I got from alchemy. But they're getting at the same thing, which is this, and the gene keys is really good at it too, because it outlines, and the human design also, it outlines for whatever gates and keys are, the shadow, gift, and city, and you can see the connection between the three. So if you had a trauma that led to a certain shadow type, and you actually evolve and get more energy rich and do your developmental work and your energy work, and you get up to this the gift of the city, you can see a deep connection, how it's all connection. It's like the hero's journey playing out over and over again. It
I
seems to
want
be an archetype.
I want to go back to what you were just saying about being the authority of your own life.
Mm-hmm.
Because I feel like that alone is a life-changing
It
perspective.
is a
And you
life
just
thing.
strung it together with three things. So I want to slow down a little and just say the moment where I like really believed I had chosen everything that happened in my life, whether I subconsciously chose it or I consciously chose it, is the day that I reclaimed my sovereignty.
Nice.
And it was hard to make peace with all the choices that I had made when I was in my subconscious. And that's what prevents some people from being able to apply this perspective. But it is the way that we quiet the victim permanently to hold
Absolutely.
this.
It's definitely a powerful tool. And it also allows you it can be for some people enable who have trouble feeling suppressed feelings. To once you have this perspective that everything serves, it's a more awakened perspective. It's much easier to do feel your suppressed feelings and shadow work. Why don't you say a little bit more about shadow work?
Covered it to a certain extent, but shadow work specifically is well, I'll introduce it by saying there's a phrase in my priestess class. I love my shadow as I love my light, for all things are transformed in love.
Mhm.
That really, the honoring of that which is our shadow material, our darker side, in relating to and making peace with that and integrating that and being with it fully, we get all of these beautiful gifts and superpowers.
Exactly. And that's one of the keys. A lot of people who are, I think, unsuccessful or are not optimally doing shadow work, they get into this place where they just want to feel a certain pain over and over again, almost like they're addicted to it. They're in this victim story, and they think that that's progress. I mean, just that's all right, maybe for a little bit, but the goal really is to transcend it by seeing the wounds in a bigger meta perspective and how they actually motivate you and set you on a certain course to serve humanity in a certain way. And that's a very important perspective. And sometimes you need higher energy to have these higher perspectives. And a lot of the stuff in the capacity path helps you with that. But also, altered states really helps with this as well. And there are all different kinds of altered states. Like an essential oil could be an altered state. You could be doing different kinds of breathwork exercises. You could be taking different kinds of supplements or psychedelics. And each of them have like a different flavor that enables you. And these altered states allow you to have higher energy and different perspectives, and allow you to like have different suppressed feelings come up and take different perspectives on it. And
Yeah, some examples of altered states that I think are a little less talked about is even just loose leaf herbs like St. John's wort. If you have depression and you're not on antidepressants, can be a huge assistant with creating positive mood. Valerian root can help with sleeping. Damiana, it's kind of like a natural aphrodisiac, and it's a tea herb. And then there's ones like blue lotus, which were literally used in Egyptian times to help create more of the higher mind experience. And so, yeah, there's so many things we could talk about when it comes to altered states, but I just wanted to name drop a few of the ones that are really approachable. Also, cacao, heart medicine, that is basically a delicious hot chocolate beverage, but is grown and prepared in ways that are sacred and also have this powerful, heart opening, just like soul homecoming effect.
And another thing that can come up during kind of altered states, we mentioned before, but there's like past live works, and then there's lineage wounds, and those are different things actually. A lineage wound is something that's carried, like a pattern that's carried within. There's all kinds of lineage wounds. I mean, there's a lineage wound for like male and female. There's like a Chinese have like a cultural lineage wound. You know, Americans have lineage wounds. Any kind of role of father, mother has lineage wounds, and it's just a matter of experience. We all kind of they're all kind of, until they're kind of cleared and understood, they're they're carried forward to generation. I'll mention one that I've come up with that was really powerful about the relationship between like man and woman that goes back to cave times. Is that there's this experience of the man going out and getting like the food to support the family, and then the mother who's like taking care of the children is like has to is dependent on that. And sometimes the mother might be get worried there's not enough food and get anxious or emotional, and that might overwhelm the male who doesn't know how to deal with all these emotions, and that led to like physical beatings. And that's like a lineage wound that goes back all the way to cave time that I discovered. And it was like, just by understanding the pattern where it came from is freeing and liberating, and allows you to transcend that pattern.
Another one that we have here for feelings, suppressed feelings, is the sexual wounds. We mentioned earlier how the International School of the Temple Arts is offering really unique containers for that. One of the tools that I most took away from that experience was their 7 emotional coping tools. We underappreciate how little emotional coping skills we learn in modern reality because
Yeah.
it's so mental. Safe ways of releasing emotion are super important to emotional health. Like in a moment where someone might out of control just like slam their hand on the
Uh-huh.
table, they might break a pinky. But if they already have a habit and a tool where you scream into your hands and shake your whole body, then it provides a way for that emotional energy to discharge or to run all the way through our system that keeps it from getting stuck in the body and manifesting as illness or tension or soreness or whatever other possible implications of backlogged emotions in the system.
I wanted to mention somatic respiratory integration and how it can be a great enhancer in shadow work and other parts of life. Don Epstein has these 12 stages of transformation, and each stage has a breath technique. And so if you know you're working on a certain aspect or which season you're working on, and you do the breath work while you're working on it, it enhances your ability to transcend that stage to get to the next stage. So really powerful modality. And another technique that's not well known about that I discovered is called life-centered therapy. And it's invented by a guy in Massachusetts where I used to live. And it's a really cool technique that it's got basically the guy who invented it. He has a PsyD. He's like into psychology, but he's also extremely open-minded. And he got into kinesiology. And for those who don't know about that, it's like muscle testing. And they kind of push on your arm. It's kind of like saying like the body knows more than the head. And you ask questions, like often yes or no questions, putting pressure on the arm, and it reveals like certain truths. And what they do is they use that muscle testing with a certain protocol to get you to access repressed memories in this life and past lives and all kinds of stuff. It's really fascinating. It requires an open mind, but I had amazing abilities, and I would, like in one session, would usually discover two major re-experiencing of some wounds. And not only do you re-experience the protocol allows you to drop into it, and like it's kind of strange. You have to really trust that like when you follow the certain protocol, you actually just like the experience just comes to you and you just relive it. And then afterwards you integrate it. You learn what did you learn from it? How does your energy shift? And there's a lot of protocols around it. It's a very powerful modality. And I always walked out of that feeling more energized, like I'd clear some important things. And then I want to talk about worthiness. I worked with a practitioner who noticed that a lot of blockages, people don't feel worthy of being healed or having certain experiences. And it's really helpful to work with people on their own self-worth and worthiness, that they're worthy of these shifts and these changes and worthy of having a great life, and that they just feel like so bad about themselves. That these worthiness codes are really, really important.
Yeah, it's these moments of unworthiness where we kind of revoke our own permission to be the way that we wish to show up in the world, and we keep holding it back with this sense of like, but my value isn't enough to take up space with that, and so it's all these microaggressions towards our own sense of self
Yeah.
that the low worthiness perpetuates. And yes, conceptually it is worthiness, but the ways that it plays out are really multifaceted. And that alone is a huge exploration.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I wanted to talk about another one that's a more esoteric, but it really showed me what was possible. When I was studying meditation, Tibetan meditation, Dzogchen and Mahamudra, which are part of this third turning Vajrayana practice, which is the highest levels of Tibetan Buddhism practices, they have a state which they call Dharma Dhatu exhaustion, which is where you're exhausting all the suppressed energy from your being, and you finally get to a state. Like there's actually some people have like come up to me is like, well, this shadow work, it seems like it takes forever and it's a never ending pit and you're always going to be doing it. Turns out the Tibetans figured out that wasn't true. And they figured out that basically their technique is to retrain the mind to not stay out of grab, that to stop pushing things away or trying to make more of things, to just stay with things and allow you to fully observe them and digest them and trust that your deeper observer knows what to do. And when you train your mind and get really disciplined, what happens is you start creating karmic memory traces, and the old ones just start to come up, and then you start. That's why it's called the exhaustion period, where all this old trapped energy just starts to release, and you've trained your mind to just be with it as it is, as an energy, and let it self arise and self liberate. Allow that energy to come out of your body, and then at the end of it, there's something like 80. You have 80 positive traits only as a baseline for your life. It doesn't mean that nothing quote unquote negative happens, but your baseline reality is like life is good. Like you have these other positive perspectives. Life is, you're feeling kind of optimistic and happy. And there's someone's, I don't have them memorized, but I've seen lists of all these different qualities, and this has been well documented by the Tibetans. And so it helps us understand that there is an end to this kind of work. It's not, you're not supposed to do this work for the rest of your life. That's not the point of it. There are levels to it, however, and so it does take a while, and certain techniques that we mentioned work at different parts of the process. And so this is one of the things that Soraya, Rachel, and I are expert at, is because we have so much experience with the full path of transformation and had direct experience with all the techniques, and we understand the different maps. We know we can help guide people to which technique is going to serve them at this moment. And different people need different techniques because they have different backgrounds, they have different experiences, they have different spiritual edges, and we're really good at helping people match where they're at and the technique that they need.
Absolutely. Yeah, this can feel like a lot of potentiality to explore, but just as a recap, there's really only 4 aspects of this path of purification and remembering wholeness, which is self-awareness as a foundation, and subtle energy healing. It's very strong, but then, letting go of limiting beliefs and stories and really feeling your suppressed feelings to enable those shifts to occur. And when you finally get to that beautiful place of feeling like your emotional backlog is empty, the shift that I've noticed is you feel emotions sharper, but they don't last as long. They just hit and melt. And when we're still backlogged, it can hit, and then there's a lot of tension because there's all these internal filters that it's kind of cascading through as the body attempts to digest it. And so I just say this to paint a picture of the reward. Our relationship to reality just becomes so much more authentic and heart-centered when we've done enough of this purification work to have a more mutually beneficial, organic, or flowing relationship with our emotional world.
Yeah. And I want to point out that I'm not here to say you need to do all the techniques that I've done. I'm on a path of like trying things out, so you don't have to try them all out. And I can tell you Soraya and I can tell you which ones are the best ones for you and now. And also, this process is fun. A lot of people might think, oh, negative suppressed emotions, I don't want to deal with that. Well, I'm telling you, the new way here is to make it a spiritual adventure, and instead of like avoiding talking about these things, when we start getting in communities and everyone's kind of like on the same page that this is actually was making us a better person, literally you start doing some of these techniques and you just start feeling better about yourself, and it creates this own momentum of like, now this is a process. And one thing I do want to point out is you don't also like, there can be a point where like, oh, I got to do this forever, but that's not the point too. Eventually you do enough of it that you start to give back and you start to live your dream. Your life stops being the complaint areas or the stuckness you were before, and what you perceived your highest reality is then your lived experience. Just like it's always been my dream to do exactly what I'm doing right now. And so that's what I want. Soraya and I are looking to help other people, is to help them have their dreams come true.
Absolutely.
So
if you have any more techniques that you feel fall under the path of purification, feel free to give us an email Or if you want to go deeper with some of these tools, we'd be happy to work with you directly or refer you to an expert. So give us a line.
Yeah, drop us a line. I'm at Jonathan at relationshipalchemist.com.
And Rachel at relationshipalchemists.com.
Next week, we'll move from the first person to the second person and start looking into the codes of intimacy. I'm excited about that one.
We hope you've enjoyed the first person perspective and the many tools that support the development of self and self-awareness. Until next time.
Good night, everyone.
As we all take accountability for our energy coherence, we create the world where more is possible. More beauty, more magic, more joy. So let's all step into conscious creatorship together. Sending you omnipresent love.